welcome to LigNet. I'm John Bachman. With us now on the phone from Washington, D.C. is Dr. Stephen Bucci. He's a former Special Forces officer and a top-level Pentagon official, and right now he works at the Heritage Foundation, specializing in cybersecurity. Dr. Bucci, it's good to talk to you.
My pleasure to be here.
So I want to get your take real quickly on these reports that this cyber unit of the Chinese military has resumed its operations recently and is thought to be snooping around on the servers and databases of U.S. companies. What do you make of these new reports and specifically of this unit?
Well, I think they probably never stopped. When the Mandiant report that identified them by both name and location came out, maybe they backed off for about a day, but then they probably got back to business. So the fact that now we're getting additional reports that they're out there and operating again is unsurprising. Keep in mind, if you've read any of the original report from Mandiant, while there is some really high-end, fancy software kind of things, the so-called advanced persistent threat, a lot of what these guys were doing was based on pretty much old-school type techniques. They sent a spear phishing email to you that looked like it came from me. And they've had it crafted so the subject would be something that I would write to you about, all those kind of things that then cause someone to click on the email and allow the upload of the malware that would get them inside the network. So really, you can stop a lot of this stuff by just using good cyber personal hygiene and by following the rules, or in some cases the regulations, that companies and organizations already have on their books, but that are ignored in large measure by a lot of folks.
And so there does seem to be at least some momentum building in Washington for a new cybersecurity bill. 6 months ago, a bill failed to pass through the Senate. What are some of the things that you like about a cybersecurity bill, the one that's been talked about already, and some things that you don't like about the federal government getting involved in the area of cybersecurity?
Well, there's a lot of momentum for a cybersecurity bill of some sort from many different quarters. And pretty much every bill that's been introduced has had bipartisan support, but has also had bipartisan opposition. In large measure, this is because there's a split as to how do we address the issues of cybersecurity. Should it be a regulatory basis, as was outlined by last year's cybersecurity bill of 2012, the so-called Lieberman-Collins bill, or should it be something else? The regulatory model is really not the best way to do this, I don't think, and here at Heritage we don't agree with, because a regulatory solution is sort of a 19th century way of dealing with a problem that's the ultimate 21st century type threat. And until we come to some sort of accommodation as to how we're going to address the problem, it's going to be tough to get a bill passed. We do need to improve cybersecurity. We do need to improve information sharing between different entities that operate on the net, but we want to make sure we do it well and wisely and not in a way that might actually potentially put us at more risk rather than less.
I just recently interviewed a financial expert who said that banks are investing heavily in cybersecurity measures, but still we've seen numerous attacks like that $45 million ATM heist a couple of weeks ago, all done remote by computers, and then hackers or whomever got the ATM cards and then went and withdrew the money, but most of the work was done remotely. We also saw that Twitter hack of the Associated Press's account, which caused the stock market to tumble, although briefly, but it still had an effect. Now, do you see any way private companies are able to get out ahead of these cyber terrorists and hackers, or is this something that's always going to have to be a reactive approach?
Well, right now the reactive approach is about the best you can do. There are, companies all over the tech world who are trying to develop the so-called silver bullet that will allow someone to provide true protection to their network, but no one's found it yet. And the bad guys are so motivated because of the money they can make or the information they can steal, and they're good. They're very talented coders. They writing malware is easier than writing protective software. And there's just so many ways to get into this very, very complex system that we refer to as the network, that it's very, very difficult to stay ahead of them. That said, we should not stop trying. We have to continually battle this. We have to work on training and education and awareness, as well as the kind of software, hardware fixes that companies are working on, so that we can lower the risk to an acceptable level. Right now, it's a holding action. We're doing the best we can, but the bad guys are trying real hard to stay ahead of us.
And we know private companies have a financial interest here. That's the deposits and the money that's in their bank accounts. But if they can't do it, why should we have any faith in the government's ability to get out ahead of these cyber threats?
Well, that's the same question I would ask. To be honest with you, the government, certain parts of the government, particularly the National Security Agency, they've got some pretty talented people, and they know the cutting edge offensive techniques that they've developed, so they know that there's probably bad guys out there working on very similar things. So there's some advantage to be gained by looking at what we're trying to do from an offensive standpoint and developing the countermeasures to that as you go along. But on the other hand, there's some brilliant people in the private sector, very, very innovative, very cutting-edge thinking that we need to leverage as a nation. We can't just leave it to the marketplace. That hasn't worked. We really shouldn't leave it just to the government. They're not capable alone of addressing this problem. It has to be a partnership, and it has to be a dynamic relationship that is not based on static standards or regulations. So it's only going to be through cooperation that we really, hopefully, can stay ahead of the bad guys.
And one specific area that we should address here is the proposed sale of cellular company Sprint. One of the suitors is a company named Softbank based in Japan, but they also have ties to a giant Chinese company named Huawei, which has been singled out by Congress for cyber spying on U.S. companies. Should the federal government block any company with these kinds of connections to Huawei from buying a U.S. telecom giant like Sprint?
Well, yeah, I think they should. We have a process whereby any sort of purchase or merger of this sort gets reviewed for national security considerations. That's a very mature and venerable process that we have that has served this nation well. And I think this is a classic example of the newest sort of merger or acquisition that needs to be reviewed. Huawei is an enormous company, has telecom reach all the way across the globe, but it's also quite questionable as to whether or not these guys are really independent or do they work for or at least with the Chinese government. And I think allowing that kind of sale to a company that's in large measure a fiction around Huawei you're really rolling the dice. So I would say, yes, the government does have a responsibility to review that sort of acquisition, and if they feel there is that threat, which I think they will in this case, they have a responsibility, not just the authority, but a responsibility to block it.
Well, SoftBank did say that they would not use any Huawei technology, but as you mentioned, Huawei is such a huge company. It's used across the globe. Is there any reason to believe that SoftBank would not use this type of technology? We also heard from the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Mike Rogers, that he was somewhat satisfied with that proposal from SoftBank. What do you think?
I would be very dubious. We have not accepted that sort of assurance to get by the CFIUS system in the past. I would, given how much China is clearly aggressively involved in this sort of intelligence gathering through these different means over the internet, I would be really, really dubious about accepting an assurance like that. And the chairman is usually much more cautious than that. I think as this gets looked at a little more closely, I'm not sure if that position will stand.
Well, we know that they are watching us, they are listening to us, they are checking in on our computers, so time is of the essence here. One last thing I want to ask you, do you think that there's any way this is going to get done, that there's going to be enough political will both in Washington and across the country to have some sort of extensive cybersecurity bill without something happening? And what are the dangers if we do have to do something after the fact?
I sure hope not. I think more and more people are starting to understand the difficulty in this area and the fact that there is great risk. And I'm hoping that political will continue to develop. I just hope it doesn't force us to do something that is not wise. In this case, I've heard a lot of people say, well, we need to do something. Anything is better than nothing. And that's not really necessarily true. You have to use that old medical thing of, first do no harm. So hopefully we'll continue this national conversation and get to the point where we can come to an agreement on the type of solution we need and then take that step to fix it. We have an advantage right now, so we do have some time, but we don't want to wait too long and allow our adversaries to take advantage of us to the point where it really causes us damage.
All right, Dr. Stephen Bucci from the Heritage Foundation, thanks for being with us.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.